Today is Wednesday, April the 2nd, 2025, and I'd like to have a meaningful discussion of geopolitics from a domestic perspective, meaning from the perspective of a wife and a mother who is going about her day-to-day activities and wondering about things that impact not only her family, but the community at large, including the world. And it is a continuation of the 3.5-minute video that I did earlier today titled Countering Counterculture with hashtags for Trump, Doge, politics, and the feds, because some of what occurred to me as I was preparing dinner, I felt like was relevant to not only that message, but geopolitics in general. So I shared with you the formal definition for geopolitics, but as usual, I'm going to break this all the way down. And essentially it means politics based upon geography. And it's important because in the context of the video that I created earlier today, my goal has been to try to help people to appreciate when they're being bamboozled. And as I was making dinner or trying to organize in my mind how I was going to make dinner tonight, I decided that with the ingredients I have at hand, that I would make something that was sort of Asian flavored because we have a lot of different preferences in terms of palates in this house, and I wanted to make something with what I had that everyone would eat. And I knew that everyone would eat something that had that type of flavoring that we're used to from Americanized Chinese restaurants. And as I was preparing it, I thought, I want to make something Asian, but one of the things I wanted to do was to make wraps, because I've been making a lot of wraps lately, but those wraps are made from ingredients that are indigenous to the United States and to the southeastern United States. And I use a lot of cheese as the sealant. And I thought to myself, well, I can't use cheese with this because, I couldn't think of any Asian, and these are the words that I was using in my mind, Asian dishes where they use cheese. And then I also thought to myself, and I can't think of any dishes where they use tomatoes either, even though I didn't use that tonight. But I said, that's interesting. And then it occurred to me, I said, well, wait a minute. Well, there's Indian dishes that use tomatoes and use different types of cheese. And I was like, that's right. Asia is not just China and Japan. And so as I thought about that, I decided maybe I need to ask Gen X if they remember when we were taught geography, when they talked about the continent that we know as Europe as Eurasia, and they don't refer to it as Eurasia anymore. And I wanted to know why that was. So I started to do some digging. But my initial thought was that that's a good way in this country to sort of get a better idea of this melting pot that we live in is, what people eat as their traditional dishes. Do they use a lot of pasta versus rice or versus potatoes? Do they not use a lot of cheese in their food? Because we use cheese here. And so, it's just another way of sort of conceptualizing the culture around us when people have become naturalized. You may have a dish that you prefer from your homeland, but those ingredients are not available here indigenously. And so you modify it using the ingredients that are here, and then you have a new recipe. So this is sort of what brought me into, this discussion that we're about to have brief discussion about geopolitics. I tried to start talking to Jermaine about it, and he was like, I'm trying to follow you, but I'm not sure. And I said, okay, I need to break this down a lot more. So the first thing I want to do is to visit some Bible scripture because, as you know, I am trying to release people of the hymn gods so that they can see reality clearly and how we all need to work together to achieve a paradise worldwide where 100% of the children and their biological families feel safe, healthy, and happy. That will require 100% agreement of 100% of the people. So I want to look at Matthew 12:25, where it says, Jesus knew their thoughts and said to them, every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. So when you think in terms of geography and geopolitics, then I begin to ask myself how this awareness or how this teaching is relevant to the idea of dividing people by separating the land in zones, jurisdictions, cities, states, countries, so forth. We also have local governments and state governments and the federal government. So how do all of these things work together to keep us divided and against each other? I also thought about the scriptural verses that spoke about Asia and the idea that Paul and those who were following him stay out of Asia. And so I went to look at that, and I found this information saying that the Asia Paul is referring to is neither the continent of Asia, as we know today, nor Asia Minor, which refers to about 2/3 of what is Turkey today, less its southeastern 30%. That southeastern 30% is probably significant to look at, but I won't do that in this video. The Asia in Acts 20:18 was a Roman province of Asia, which made up the western quarter or 1/4 of what is Turkey today. So that's significant for that part of the world, especially as it relates to conflict, which is ongoing in that area. So when you think about politics in terms of something that divides people, how does that look in our lives in 2025? We have so many schisms, which is a word that describes something that happens in the mind when you have two opposing ideas that are both true, but instead of being able to incorporate those ideas, we keep them segregated in ways that we cannot bring those two perspectives together to make sense as one whole. Even on the individual level, how many labels do you use to identify yourself, by your race, by your social and economic class, by your sexual identity, by your gender identity? There are so many ways that our mind is divided from our individual lives all the way out to the global community. And I hope that makes sense to somebody. Conversely, we have something like food as an example of how individual elements can be brought together for a singular purpose and bring an entirely new flavor to the whole experience. And I just want you to pause and think about that for a moment. As I was preparing this, I combined a lot of different ingredients. I'm using flour tortillas, which I usually use for wraps, which I also use to make burritos and chimichangas. And I use ground beef. I threw together some other leftovers I had to make this version of a shrimp lo mein using angel hair pasta. And so, it's about being able to be creative and use knowledge that varies on a lot of different levels and bringing them all together to combine them into something that is meaningful and useful for everyone. As a side note, I'll say that my father used to prepare lumpia all the time, which is a Philippine dish, and it reminds me a lot of that. My father was not from the Philippines. He served there while he was in the Navy, but he brought home these flavors and recipes to us where he was native so that we could enjoy them and I could prepare this dish even now. I also want to mention that one of the ways that people who have been unable to benefit from nature in the way that nature intended also are highly aversive to waste. And so I was able to use these packets, which we save, in order to provide some additional flavor to this particular recipe using what I had available to bring together a meal for my family. People who have been forced to make a way will find a way, and that is the best way I can describe a people, a native people, who remain empowered even when they have nothing.